Welcome to episode 1. Today we will be talking about J. Cole. Born in Germany but raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Jermaine Lamar Cole, or J. Cole, his stage name, is considered as one of the biggest and best rappers of the new hip hop era. He initially started rapping and making beats around the age of 12, but started to get serious about creating and recording music in his late teenage years. His academic performance throughout high school was able to get him a scholarship into St. John's University in New York City, and it was there that he made lots of progress by waiting outside of Jay-Z's office and gave him a copy of his music. To his surprise, he got a call from the legend and was eventually signed to his label. After this, J. Cole went on to release his debut album, Cole World: The Sideline Story. He also released Born Sinner in 2013, which was pretty successful. However, in 2014, he released Forest Hills Drives, which was definitely his best work in many people's opinion. This specific album was recorded without any features from any guest artist and has gone double platinum. That means over 2 million copies sold. His latest album, For Your Eyes Only, was released in 2016 and is probably his most self-conscious album to date. I want to remind you all the goal of this podcast once again. I want to really destroy the stereotypes that surround hip hop and show you that this genre of music is currently influencing the community in a positive way. In the beginning, J. Cole tells us that he was not in the mental or emotional state that he is in now. He is conscious of the influence and messages that he can support or present because of his status as a musician. He can amplify voices that need to be heard, and he really does this through his tracks. '03 Adolescence from 2014 Forest Hills Drives is a song that really highlights his teenage years and the mentality that he was surrounded with. A mentality that does not care about school and then has to turn to different ways of continuing through life, sometimes illegally, such as selling drugs. He illustrates how he looked up to his friends because they were selling drugs and making lots of money. But when he actually talked to him, they were the ones that looked up to him because he was actually getting an education that could take him far in life. It was then that he really started to appreciate his fortunate circumstances. This song really is a journey from which he transitions from a teenager into an adult, and he really realizes how lucky he is and the fortunate conditions that he is living with. A Tale of Two Cities, also from 2014 Forest Hills Drives, is a record in which Cole illustrates the internal struggle that was present in his hometown, Fayetteville. The city was divided into two sides. There was a side that was a lot poorer and that had a lot more crime present, and the other side was safer and economically more stable. He talks about both perspectives and the struggles and mentalities that they had. He says that the thoughts of turning to crime in order to stop struggling was the mentality that some people had because he had friends that experienced the same thing. He really had experience with both sides and both mentalities that one side of the town had and that the other side had. He really wants to present the struggles that people around him lived that most of us are oblivious to. He wants to raise awareness, not to justify the wrong actions of people, but give us an idea of why they do what they do. Have us put ourselves in their shoes. Love Yours, once again from 2014 Forest Hills Drives, is a song that talks about the little importance that material possessions hold in your life. He explains that what really matters is the people around you and the love that they have for you. In his concerts, he talks about how there are people in this world that are extremely rich, yet they are miserable. He talks about the things and ideas that we are constantly being told that we need. You know, a big house, a nice car, a beautiful wife, lots of money. And we really live in an unhappy and unsatisfied society that is constantly being bombarded with the need to consume and spend money. He really wants us to know that these are not the real things that matter in our lives. So, as a whole, 2014 Forest Hill Drives, J. Cole explains that this album really is a story and the soundtrack to his life. He says that he's trying to teach us the things that he had to go out in the world and learn. And as a whole, he talks about the struggles that he had to live with when he was growing up, the temptation to sell drugs and start making money instead of going to school, the importance of education and how far it has taken him, the appreciation and the acknowledging of all the blessings in his life, how fortunate he was, and how we are compared to others. He talks about the importance of his mother in his life. There's no such thing as a life that's better than yours. Personally, I feel that this is an album that is extremely powerful and positive, especially for teenagers who are growing up. In a way, he's giving advice and tips for life, if you will. Of course, he talks about violence, money, women, drugs, but in this album, he's far from promoting or encouraging these things.
On top of that, the house on the cover of the album, which happens to be his childhood home, was bought by himself and is now used by his organization to help house single mothers with children. He remembers how lucky his parents were to get a house in a nice, peaceful neighborhood in the safer part of Fayetteville. He has said in interviews that he dreamed in that house and became the person that he is today. He wants to help the people that he is providing his home with the same opportunities to dream, become whatever they want, and provide a life where they have a safe place to live and not worry about it.
I want to move to his latest album now, For Your Eyes Only, with the song Immortal. This is a song that commemorates his fallen friends and how they will never be forgotten. Once again, like I said before, he grew up in a neighborhood that was full of crime, that was poor, that didn't necessarily have the best conditions, and he talks about the discrimination of African American people in society, the police violence, and sadly he says that he has had friends that have passed because of police violence. Ville Mentality is a song where he once again talks about the mentality that people in the city were riddled with. He repeats the line, "How can I live with this mentality?" several times throughout the course of the song. He refers to the mentality of selling drugs, not caring about school, etc. And that eventually led many of his friends to suffering throughout their lives and even losing their life. Change is an extremely powerful song in this album. This record is very religious and portrays the relationship between God and men. We all sin, but not for the same reasons. Once again, he talks about the struggles that black people experience in poor neighborhoods and how God would understand. In this track, Cole wants us to be like God. We don't always understand the motives behind crimes or horrendous acts, but we must try not to judge. We don't live in the same situations that these people live in. Maybe if we were aware, we would be more forgiving. Finally, he finishes this track with the details behind the death of his close friend. With this, he talks about the necessary change that needs to come to society, the change to the justice system, the change with police brutality, the change in mentality. Neighbors is a song in which Jermaine illustrates his personal experience with the police. His house was broken into and searched because his nearby neighbors, which were white, thought that he was selling drugs. He decided to move from a poorer neighborhood into a nicer neighborhood because of the success that he got through his music. In their mind, his neighbors, this would be the only thing that could explain the amount of money that he and his friends possessed, the parties that they had, and why they would never leave the house was the fact that they were selling drugs. That's what they thought. And that's the reason why they called the police on them. At the end of the song, he talks about how he never should have left his neighborhood. I recently went to one of his shows, and he explained to us what he meant by this.
Instead of doing that, I thought about it. I had to do some thinking. And this is what I came up with. I had to check myself, because I know they in the wrong, but I had to check myself. And I'm going to tell you why. I felt like I was guilty. I don't know how it is out here, but in the States, every time a black man gets some money, the first place we want to move to is what? Where do we want to move to? Right? 9 times out of 10, it's going to be around somebody that don't want us next door to them, right? But what we won't do, we won't go back to our neighborhoods or where we come from and build that shit up. Buy some property, build it up, invest. We won't do that. So I felt like I was guilty of that. And it made me write this.
For Your Eyes Only is the final track of his album. J. Cole tells the entire story of his friend who lost his life. This track is 8 minutes long, and it's a storytelling lyrical masterpiece. I highly recommend that you listen to it if you get the chance. Throughout it, he talks once again about the struggles of black people, the broken justice system that treats unfairly African Americans. He talks about parenthood. He talks about going to jail and finding it hard to get and maintain a job. He talks about dealing drugs and living in fear of being caught or getting killed. This album really is a story, but it's also a statement. It's a dedication to his friend who was shot by police officers. This is his way of spreading a message and joining everyone else that is going against police brutality. Once again, this album does have curse words. It talks about drugs, violence, but with the goal to criticize these things, to make us think and reflect about these topics. He's talking about the reality of certain people. This album was created with the goal to raise awareness, spread a message, and for Cole to share his views on this problem. Like I said before, J. Cole, he talks about all these subjects, but he's not referring to his life. He's referring to the life of his friends and experiences that his close people that are close to him have experienced, and he really wants us to realize, to kind of understand, and to, like I said before, step in their shoes to kind of understand the struggles that we are fortunate enough not to live. Sometimes we don't understand everything. We don't understand the struggles, and that's not a bad thing. But maybe, through this album, we were able to understand, and it's an act of support that he shows for the African American community and all these people in struggle.
In conclusion, J. Cole is a rapper that is using the influence and power that he has gained through his fame to talk about issues present in society and give us a perspective on the difficult lives that African American citizens live with. He tells stories and talks about his life experience that he has gained throughout the years. He is convinced that the system and that society present today has to change, and he is doing his part with the things that he is sharing through his music.